0.5 to 9%. Now, if they got 9%, that would probably be a full majority. They need to get about 36% in the parliament. And that would mean that the Syriza could do whatever they liked because they wouldn't have to sort of join hands really with another party. If they don't get that amount, and a lot of people are saying they don't think that they will steal that much all the way, then most likely we're hearing to join up with the independent Greek party, a sort of centre-right party, if you like, and a Euro, sort of bit more pro-Euro than, of course, Syriza are. So everybody's looking towards how far that Syriza will take the lead. Nobody's expecting Antonio Samaras to win this election now. In fact, the radios are broadcasting that they believe this is the last day in office for the Prime Minister, Antonio Samaras.
Sue, thank you very much indeed. That's Al Jazeera's Sue Turton live for us in Athens. Now, freedom and whiskey gang together. Those are the words of Scotland's nationalist poet Robert Burns, who's being celebrated at events across the world this weekend. Among the most enthusiastic will be the Scottish National Party, who are enjoying a surge in the opinion polls ahead of this year's general election. Lawrence Lee is in Dundee and sends this report on what it could all mean.
Mark the rustic, haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread.
Burns Night, a celebration of Scotland's most famous poet and his homage to a meal made from a sheep's stomach. But never mind if outsiders find it hard to understand. At this Scottish National Party Burns Supper, they're far more interested in public opinion within Scotland.
The haggis.
And it is more positive than ever before.
I think it's just a natural progression. The 19th century was the era of the great nation states. The 20th century saw a lot of them break up, and finally in the 21st century, Scotland will be restored to the family of nations.
The Burns Supper is in Dundee, one of only 2 Scottish cities which voted for independence in last September's referendum. Their argument lost. Scotland remains within the Union. But for how much longer when the nationalists are now so popular? Since they lost the referendum last September, support for the Scottish nationalists has risen and risen and risen again. And if the polls stay as they are at the moment, they will win almost every single parliamentary seat in Scotland in national elections in May. That would make them the 3rd biggest political party in the whole of the UK and give them the most extraordinary leverage over the parties in Westminster, which fought tooth and nail to deny them their dream of an independent Scotland. Yet all those people who voted for independence did so on the assumption that Scotland's wealth would be built on oil, trading at more than $100 a barrel. Just 4 months on, and the price has halved.
There is no way we can pay for public services and all of these things in Scotland based on that instability. You can't run a country just on that one commodity. And I think voters will realise and do realise that that economic credibility has just gone, it's shot to pieces.
Our opponents are wrong. Our case for independence was never predicated on the price of oil. It wasn't predicated on oil at all. That's a bonus for the Scottish economy.
The value of oil to Scotland became the central economic issue during the referendum. How striking, then, that the halving of its value hasn't affected opinion here at all, which seems increasingly certain in Scotland's ability to stand up for itself. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, Dundee.
Still ahead on the Al Jazeera News Hour, the new king and his successors. We take a closer look at the future shape of the Saudi monarchy. After years of neglect, foreign investment helps Nigeria's train system get slowly back on track. And in sports, we meet a group of runners who have completed 7 marathons in 7 continents, all in the space of a week. Stay with us.
February on Al Jazeera.
In a 2-part series, Wu Can tells the extraordinary tale of the struggle for democracy within one village in China.
Nigeria holds its general election amidst an unprecedented security challenge and a wave of violence that has killed thousands.
Documenting how the Lebanese community in Punchbowl, Australia, overcame the odds to find its place in a multicultural nation.
The best films from across our network. Al Jazeera World challenges perspectives. Discover the world in a different way.
In a three-part series, Al Jazeera examines the challenges Muslims face in retaining their identity and being recognized as French.
February on Al Jazeera.
Wealth taxes of any form, those are getting seemingly more harsh by the month.
Al Jazeera's new iPad app, now available via the App Store.
Welcome back. You're watching the Al Jazeera News Hour. A reminder now of our top stories. A senior Kurdish security official has told Al Jazeera Iraqi forces need foreign boots on the ground to defeat ISIL. Peshmerga forces are struggling to push back ISIL fighters in the north of Iraq. Oxfam says political instability in Yemen has brought the country to the brink of a humanitarian crisis. The aid agency says 16 million people are already in need of aid, including millions who don't have enough to eat. And at least 10 people are dead in Ukraine after shelling in a residential area of Mariupol. That's a government-held port southeast of the city of Donetsk. It's the latest attack as fighting intensifies across several fronts. Now, a day after inheriting the crown, Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdelaziz is expected to meet more foreign heads of state. US President Barack Obama is the latest leader to announce he will travel to Riyadh in the coming days. Gerald Tan has more now on the new monarch.
The dignitaries came to pay their respects to a leader who died and the half-brother who took his place. In keeping with tradition, there was no formal swearing-in ceremony for King Salman bin Abdelaziz Al Saud. It was during the funeral of King Abdullah that regional heads of state from Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait, among others, were able to meet the man who now leads one of the Gulf's richest and most influential nations. Shortly after ascending the throne, the new king said he would maintain the same policies as his predecessors.
We are going to continue with the approach of Father, King Abdullah Aziz, who built the state and is followed by his sons. We are going to continue to implement the Quran and the character of the Prophet Muhammad into our legislation.
One of his first acts as king was to set the chain of succession for years to come. By royal decree, his half-brother Crown Prince Mukrin has been affirmed as the immediate successor. But King Salman also appointed his nephew as deputy Crown Prince, second in line to the throne. Prince Mohammed bin Nayef is now the first grandson of Saudi Arabia's founder to be named as future heir. He's a powerful figure behind Saudi security policies.
Mohammed bin Nayef was interior minister and is an expert on counterterrorism. And I think that's a signal that the kingdom under King Salman is going to be very focused on internal security and regional security.
And it's a region in transition. King Salman's reign begins against the backdrop of a war in Syria, the advance of ISIL and turmoil in Yemen. All issues of concern to Saudi Arabia, long seen as a pillar of stability in the Arab world. Gerald Tan, Al Jazeera.
Well, to discuss Saudi Arabia's change in leadership, I'm now joined from Riyadh by Baria Alamuddin. She's editor-at-large for the Al Hayat newspaper. Thank you very much for being with us. It's good to have you on Al Jazeera. Now, King Salman's first public remarks were a reassuring message of stability and cohesion. But we are nonetheless seeing a new generation of royals taking power. The new deputy crown prince, for instance, has a reputation as a modernizer. So what are the prospects then for the future? Do you expect any significant changes ahead?
Well, you know, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, what King Salman has said yesterday is not different to what King Abdullah has said before him or what King Fahd has said before him. Nevertheless, you're absolutely right to point out a new leadership, if you like, a much younger generation of the royals coming to the fold of the governance. It's really interesting how quickly King Salman has appointed, made sure that Prince Mughram became his first crown prince, and then is Prince Mohammed. Prince Mohammed, this is like a new position in the royalty in Saudi Arabia, the crown prince to the crown prince almost, a number 2 in the line of succession that is assured. And it's very interesting how many people got this right by saying maybe somebody can remove Prince Abdullah from his position. Once there is al-bay'ah, which means that the royal family and the people of the Saudi Arabia at large have given their consent to the 3 top people, which are now the king, Crown Prince Mughram, and the Crown Prince to the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef. So this is really security and stability for Saudi Arabia for quite a long time to come. We all know that Prince Mohammed is not even 50 years old.
Right.
It's interesting also appointing a 35-year-old Minister of Defense. So I suspect that we will be seeing some changes in foreign policy. I doubt there will be much changes in defense policy. Saudi Arabia is not like Iran, is not a country that tries to go into other countries indirectly or directly. I also expect to see more focus on education. We know that this is something that the kingdom has started.
Sure.
It's almost a revolution in the education system. There are lots of challenges facing the team that will be governing this country.
Indeed, a lot of challenges. But do you expect the focus to be more on the external and, what's happening in the region, the violence in neighboring Yemen, of course, the oil market, the threat of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant? Or are you expecting more focus perhaps internally, because we have seen some tension internally recently in Saudi Arabia?
Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. There has to be focus on both. They cannot, this leadership cannot deny what's happening around them. Yemen is a huge challenge. Iraq is a huge challenge. Syria is a huge challenge. The idea that Iran tries to play around in the field in Bahrain, in Lebanon. So Saudi Arabia faces this, but nevertheless, there is a young population here, and the late Saudi King Abdullah has sent hundreds of thousands of Saudis to study abroad. These have to come back. They have to find jobs. Also, the security within the kingdom. We all know there is elements of Daesh, elements of ISIS, and I think this is where the importance of somebody like Prince Mohammed bin Nayef comes. He has succeeded to a great extent so far in reining these people inside the kingdom. So I also
speaking of inside the kingdom,
suspect there will be some changes in the government.
Right. Speaking of, you mentioned inside the kingdom itself. I wonder, how ready is the Saudi public for more progress, for changing course, for reforms on issues such as women's rights? Are they ready for that, or are they happy with continuity, if you will?
I think the Saudi population is quite mixed and quite divided on these things. You have the very hardliners when it comes to the religion and to express their opinions and to go ahead with almost word by word doing what the Quran says. And of course, there are different interpretations to that. And there are the modernizers that pray 5 times a day, that do Ramadan and do all these things, but still they want to modernize. Really, there is quite a big division in the kingdom, and it's not easy for the ruling family to walk through these tight ropes, if you like, to govern their people. I think education is extremely important. I doubt that the kingdom or its leadership can go back on reform, and the more people get educated, the more they want reform, and the more they want jobs, the more they want modernization, in my opinion. Nevertheless, we should not underestimate the hardliners in the kingdom.
It's very interesting to talk to you, Baria Alamuddin, editor-at-large of the Al Hayat newspaper, joining us there live from Riyadh. Thanks for your time. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has said he would like to see the case against 3 Al Jazeera journalists resolved. Our colleagues have now been imprisoned in Egypt for 392 days. Mohamed Fahmy, Peter Gresse and Bahir Mohammed were falsely accused of colluding with the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Al Jazeera continues to demand their release. In Zambia's election, ruling party candidate Edgar Lungu has a slight lead. The election was called following the death of President Michael Sata. Turnout has been low, with reports of delays to voting in some remote areas. Staying with Africa, Nigeria's government has embarked on a mission to revamp the country's railways. For years, the dilapidated system didn't run at all. But as Baria Alamuddin reports now, trains may be back on track, but not quite at full speed.
After decades of neglect, trains in Nigeria are back on track, and passengers are breathing life into the century-old railway system. This refurbished line from the commercial capital Lagos to its northern counterpart Kano reopened last year.
I like the train because it's safe and it's enjoyable.
Lekon Busari says he no longer has to worry about bandits or bad drivers when he takes the journey back to his family house twice a month. Richard Kolobo says this is his second time on board. He's going to visit his grandmother.
I like taking the train because it's cheaper compared to air and road. And what I don't like about it is that it's slow.
The train does seem to move at a lower speed than the scheduled 50 kilometers an hour. When we took part of the trip, it was not crowded, but passengers tell us more people join along the stops. At times, there's not enough space for everyone to sit.
At the current level of skeletal services being operated, the Nigerian Railway Authority estimates that roughly 5 million passengers use the train. That's not considered very many in a country of nearly 170 million people.
The Nigerian government has been aggressively working to expand and refurbish the colonial-era network. By some estimates, between $8 to $10 billion were committed to cross-country projects in the past 7 years, most of the contracts going to state-run Chinese firms. A $12 billion provisional agreement was signed with China Railway Construction Corporation to build a new 1,400-kilometer line along the coast. It's described as China's largest overseas contract.
Funding is a major issue when it comes to railway construction. I'm not aware of any other country offering Nigeria, as we speak today, a better offer. I'm talking about next to nothing interest rate.
But some researchers